Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Climate-Ready Healthy Plymouth Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness online workshop. We know that these are very difficult times, and I wanted to get started to thank you all for taking the time to join us and to provide your input. And despite all the uncertainty and the challenges that we're all experiencing, we do hope that this effort can continue to promote a healthy community, a resilient community in the face of the challenges that we are experiencing today and ahead with climate change. I do want to give a shout out to all of those who are helping to keep Plymouth safe and healthy, and that includes you as well during COVID-19. I hope you're all feeling well and your loved ones are well, and that we continue with our social distancing and soon come back to enjoying life together with a more resilient community. So the first part, I would just like to introduce the Climate-Ready Healthy Plymouth project. And our overall agenda for this online workshop is, we're already in the middle of it. We had an introduction from the town of Plymouth, thanking you for joining us today. I'm going to give about a 25-minute introduction to the Climate-Ready Healthy Plymouth Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Workshop and our goals. And then there'll be an opportunity as you move forward on this workshop platform to view information boards. There are 5 of them. Each of the boards comes with audio and transcripts of the audio. They're about 5 minutes each, so we anticipate about 25 minutes for those boards. And those kind of dig into some of the issues that we're looking at with Climate-Ready Healthy Plymouth. And then we're going to move on to look for your area of expertise and looking at the environment, infrastructure, and society and public health. We're asking you to identify from your area of expertise 3 vulnerabilities or strengths for each of those categories. And those we anticipate would take about 8 to 10 minutes each. There'll be hyperlinks to help you think through what that might look like and what the public has stated in answering these questions to date, to help guide you and inform you on making some good choices on how you answer those questions. And then afterwards, we're going to ask you to think about some resilient actions around environment, infrastructure, and society and public health, so that we can take on each of those vulnerabilities that you have described with some actions. And at the end, we'll ask you to take about 5 minutes to prioritize some of the actions that you presented to us earlier in the program. This workshop is designed to be completed at your own pace and at your own time frame. We do have office hours, and I'll talk a little bit more about that if you encounter some challenges. We're here to help. So let's get started into Climate-Ready Healthy Plymouth. This is a project that seeks to identify specific and viable long-term solutions to improve the resilience, vitality, and health of Plymouth. Solutions can only be identified if we clearly define climate change and public health challenges we are trying to solve. Your on-the-ground knowledge and expertise are critically important to this work, and this online workshop is a step in the process of defining that problem and creating actions for building a more resilient community. This project is funded by a grant from the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, and it is part of the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program. As of this date, there's about over 85% of the communities in Massachusetts are designated MVP communities. And by completing this process with us today, this will enable the town to become a designated MVP community and be able to qualify for funding and actions grants to implement this plan for climate preparedness. So the town received an MVP action grant for $72,000, which is paying for the majority of this effort. And we look forward to working together to apply for further action grants. In this round, there's $10 million that are being allocated for FY20 and FY21. And so at this point in time, there is money available to really preserve and build more resilient actions with the state. So I'd like to introduce you to the team. My name is Darcy Schofield. I'm a senior environmental planner with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. My colleague Jeanette Pantoja is a a public health planner with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, an integral partner in this project. Lee Hartman is the planning director for the town of Plymouth and has been the leader and the project manager for this effort and greatly engaged. And then we're partnering with Old Colony Planning Council, Lori Muncie, who is a principal comprehensive planner. A little bit about the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. We are a legislatively designated state agency that provides regional planning and technical assistance to 101 municipalities in the metropolitan Boston area. This encompasses over 3 million residents, 1.8 million jobs, and 101 municipalities. Our mission is to promote regional collaboration, smart growth, climate resilience, and equity. And although the town of Plymouth is not in our designated region, we do provide our services across the Commonwealth where applicable, and we're really excited to partner with your regional planning agency, Old Colony Planning Council, to complete this effort. So we've been working in the field of climate for over 10 years in a variety of ways, and Metropolitan Area Planning Council has many different departments with a wide array of expertise from public health, arts and culture, environment, clean energy, transportation, economic development, and many more agencies, public affairs, government affairs, and emergency planning. And we use a real integrated framework to approaching climate change. Climate change does not stay within boundaries, nor does it stay within sectors. We think this is a really important approach. Old Colony Planning Council, as I mentioned, is the regional planning council for the town of Plymouth and surrounding communities. Their office is located in Boston, and their northern range, Plymouth is their southern range, Stoughton being their northern range. They provide transportation planning, comprehensive land use planning, economic development, natural resource and environmental planning, as well as Area Agency on Aging, GIS, and the Massachusetts Environmental Protection Act. This project is being guided by a multidisciplinary core team that has been actively engaged throughout this process, beginning in August of 2019. Some of the members include Karen Keene, the Public Health Department, Bill Keon from Community Preservation, Brigitte Cohen from Board of Health, Ken Tavares from the Board of Selectmen, David Gould from Marine and Environmental, Henry Light from Emergency Management, Christopher Moore, which is a community engagement volunteer with Beth Israel Deaconess Hospital, and a number of volunteers, community member volunteers, to help spread the word and get the public involved in this effort, as well as provide guidance in their knowledge. So even though we're reaching out to you now, we have been working on this project since July of 2019 together, and we've been doing this work very diligently, and we're now at the final component of task 4, which is the Community Resilience Building Workshop. But we've completed existing conditions, we've drafted a climate change and health vulnerability assessment, which really digs into the science and data associated with vulnerabilities and strengths in the town of Plymouth and the spatial analysis associated with that. We've completed 4 to 5 focus groups and 1 public forum in January 27th. And now we're doing one of the 2 final public engagement pieces, which is the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Workshop online. We will be having a public forum in May, maybe an online public forum, and then we'll be completing a final report. So all of these things, once they're complete, will enable the town, as I mentioned, to be designated a municipal vulnerability preparedness community, which qualifies the town for state grants for implementation. As I mentioned, we've been working since July and August, and we're looking to wrap up this project. It will be completed by the end of June. So now I wanted to move forward to talk a little bit about climate change and public health and what that means for the town of Plymouth. So why climate change and public health? What we know that looking at public health, social determinants of health, these are characteristics that help to identify health outcomes for all individuals. And we also know that climate change is changing our current patterns and will be changing future weather patterns to become more severe and unlike what we've experienced in the past. And by aligning the two of these, we can ensure that public health and the environmental impacts to public health are aligned to ensure that we have a climate-ready, healthy Plymouth. Climate change largely deals with the weather and science of sea level rise and projections, but none of that really matters except for the fact that these have very strong influence on the people of Plymouth. So we are looking to align these strategies to ensure a overall vulnerability and resilience approach. So Climate-Ready Healthy Plymouth is based upon these climate change and public health fundamentals, which is guiding our direction for this effort. So first, humans have a right to the resources necessary for health. Second, people and their physical environment are interdependent. Third, climate change threatens the fundamentals that sustain life and health. Fourth, everyone, everywhere is affected. Fifth, health risks and impacts of climate change are not equally distributed across people's community or nations. And sixth, climate change exacerbates existing health inequities. And through the rest of the remainder of this online workshop, you will be guided through some resources to help explain a little bit more about what all of these mean. So as I mentioned, we're first aligning the social determinants of health for the town of Plymouth. We're drawing on the Beth Israel Deaconess Health Community Needs Assessment for health, as well as the Health Impact Assessment for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and looking at the social determinants of health that are standardized by the CDC and thinking through how does climate change influence this. We know that social determinants of health can predict health outcomes for individuals. So what are the impacts of climate change through this lens? So these social determinants of health include the built-in neighborhood environment. So that is a top icon, which includes transportations and streets, our residences, buildings and infrastructure, parks and open spaces, as well as environmental exposure in those neighborhoods. Education, the formal education in schools, activities in community groups, and informal education. Income, poverty, and unemployment have a real strong influence on our social determinants of health, as well as housing, whether a person rents or owns, homelessness, housing affordability, neighborhood access to parks, and toxic exposure within housing. And then we're looking at safety, which is the fourth icon from the last on this chart. And that includes mental health, domestic and self-violence, collective and large violence or large-scale conflict, like you might see in gang violence or in wars, repression and neglect, and social inequality. And then finally, social cohesion. What are the interpersonal and community and societal connections that the community of Plymouth has that can help boost and strengthen our climate resilience and our public health outcomes? So what are some of these things look like? In this presentation, we'll be just giving you a snapshot of some of the strengths and vulnerabilities for Plymouth and the county itself. So for example, 86% of the town of Plymouth has access to exercise opportunities, and 86% of residents live within a 10-minute walk to a park. So these are really great strengths. There's only 9.4% food insecurity, which is food insecurity defines access to healthy foods or your ability to get to places where there's healthy foods available. That can be grocery stores to farmers markets. 0 to 2% lack internet, proper plumbing, or full kitchens. So what that means is 98 to 100% have proper utilities associated with healthy housing. 97% have health insurance, and that's the second highest rate in the state. And there's 373 violent crimes per 100,000 people, and that's been trending down since 2007. So these are all great strengths for the Plymouth and Plymouth County. Some of the challenges that we're seeing in Plymouth County specifically, because we don't have this data specific to the town of Plymouth, is that we're seeing in the county that there's 23% of residents are physically inactive, and that's the third highest in the state, despite the fact that 86% have access to exercise opportunities or parks. We're seeing a 29% obesity rate, which is the second highest in math. Again, that's Massachusetts, and that is for Plymouth County. 11% have diabetes in Plymouth County, and that's the second highest in Massachusetts. We're seeing 37 drug overdoses per 100,000 deaths, and that's the second highest rate in Massachusetts. And then 16.2% of adult smoking in Plymouth County, the third highest in Massachusetts. So climate change, when we talk about climate change, we look at it in three different ways. We generally tend to group this through sea level rise, temperature, and precipitation. And then we look at what's happened in the last century or in the last 30 to 40 years, and then what are scientists projecting for mid to late century. So this gives you a bit of a snapshot of what some of the climate change impacts we anticipate specifically for the town of Plymouth. So for example, we've seen 11 inches of sea level rise in the last century in Boston Harbor, and scientists are projecting about greater than 4 feet by mid-century and greater than 7 feet by the end of the century. We've seen an increase in global temperatures at 2% as well as in Massachusetts. And we're looking at 22 days over 90 degrees, whereas our baseline today might be 8, and 50 days over 90 degrees by the end of the century. And then precipitation, we're looking at a 10% increase in overall precipitation in Boston and a 70% increase in the Northeast United States of precipitation in the top 1% of storms. So storms like Winter Storm Riley in March of 2018. And then we're also seeing more severe and extreme weather events becoming more frequent. So the 1% annual chance storm, like a Winter Storm Riley, having a chance of happening, and 25% chance of happening in any given year. And in our information boards, you'll learn more details about these things. How does climate change occur? Well, we know that the greenhouse effect exists by the emission of greenhouse gases. Many of these are naturally occurring. Carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere, nitrous oxide and methane through all number of plant processes and decomposition. But what we have seen is that, and this is important because they get trapped in our atmosphere and creates warming of our planet. And that allows life to grow, allows us to live here. But what we do know is that since the industrialization of our society beginning in the late 1890s, in the early 19th century, late 19th century, is that we've dramatically increased the concentration of our greenhouse gases into the atmosphere through the burning of fossil fuels as our energy source. And you can see on the chart on the right that there's a direct correlation, and there's widespread scientific consensus that the carbon dioxide concentration in our atmosphere is leading to global temperature warming. So let's dig in a little bit about sea level rise and what that looks like in Plymouth. So what you're looking on the map to the left is a map of Plymouth from 1890. And we're looking at the line in the yellow is where the current coastline, or from the last decade, what the current coastline looks like now. So we can see that the town of Plymouth has experienced not only sea level rise, but in some areas more excessive erosion. So for example, at the mouth of the Eel River, Plymouth Long Beach, as well as Manamet Point, we're seeing the most significant rates of erosion in some years from 9 to 15 feet. And so what does that look like on the ground? The photograph at the top is Plymouth Long Beach during Winter Storm Riley. And then the bottom photo is Manamet Cliff area where we're seeing a house starting to fall into the sea during the blizzard of 1978. So for precipitation, we talked about a 10% increase and an increase in extreme weather events. And I wanted to give you a little bit, but as well as more precipitation or precipitation happening in any single event, we're also seeing longer periods of dryness, and so an increased vulnerability to drought. So for Plymouth, for example, in July 12th of 2019, Plymouth received 5.69 inches of rain in a single rain event in one day, and that is very severe. So that is an example of the types of things we will see more frequently with climate change. Also in December, this is the map on the right, on the top right, is looking at the Massachusetts drought status in December of 2016. So in December and November, we start to see those drier conditions become less because there's more fall and early winter precipitation events. But that was not the case in 2016, where we were seeing that the majority of Massachusetts was still in a drought warming, except for Cape Cod. And the implications of that can be very severe for the town of Plymouth, where the town experienced two major wildfires historically, one in 1957 and one in 1964. And some of these caused widespread, massive wildfire damage from Carver, from the border of Carver all the way to the coast of Plymouth. And this is in large part because Plymouth contains a very unique pine-bearing forest. This is one of the largest pine-bearing forests globally, and that's very exciting and very wonderful for the town of Plymouth. But it contains pitch pine, which has resinous cones, which make it very flammable. So the good news is that during that time, when we had those wildfires in the late 50s and 60s, there's minimal damage and loss of life. However, Plymouth has experienced tremendous growth and development in those areas since that time, and so the damage could be more severe if that were to occur again. However, with the onset of cellular communications, as well as prescribed burning practices within the state forest, the risk of widespread wildfire is diminished. So I wanted to talk to you about temperature. So we've seen 2 degrees of warming, and that might not feel very different between a 63-degree day and a 65-degree day. You're probably still wearing the same sweater. However, 2 degrees in Boston overall and warming of the globe has very far-reaching impacts on systems. It is increasing the melting of our glaciers, causing more water coming into our oceans. It is changing the seasonality and the seasonality of our systems. For example, just 2 degrees has caused an increase in our growing season by 14.3 days in the Boston area, and that's just since 1970. And as well as we experienced this winter, we're seeing shorter cold snaps. So whereas this winter we might have had a couple of days that were really cold, they very, very quickly turned to become more warmer days. So overall, since 1970, we're seeing 4 fewer days of cold snaps. More importantly, we're looking at, in the map on the left, we're looking at areas that are urban heat islands. And these are areas that are described as being of greater temperatures than surrounding areas, in large part because of less tree canopy cover, more impervious surface, and types of surfaces that can trap and absorb heat for the long period. So what we're looking at in the map are areas that were 97 and 99 degrees or greater than 100 degrees during a very hot day in July of 2016. This is land surface temperature. So we're seeing that North Plymouth and some area downtown Plymouth, some areas of West Plymouth are very warm, and these are our areas of urban heat islands. And we'll talk a little bit more about the implications of those, but areas that are hotter than others can create worse air pollution challenges and can have an effect on heat illness, particularly those that are more vulnerable. So what is Climate Ready Healthy Plymouth? So as I mentioned, we're looking to put the social determinants of health and align those with climate change to create an engine of Climate Ready Healthy Plymouth for resilience. So, and by aligning these, I wanted to give you a snapshot of what that might look like. So the map that you're looking at the left is the tree canopy cover and the urban heat islands in the town of Plymouth. But the town of Plymouth has 54% of its land cover in trees, and that doesn't include the 5,000 acres of water or more that you have in the town. So the majority of the town is covered by tree canopy cover, and that is excellent news. And those trees have a tremendous value, what we call ecosystem services or ecological services that they provide not only to the community's health, but also to the community's economy. So for example, because of the tree canopy cover, it is reducing pollutants and capturing carbon dioxide and reducing pollutants such as fine particulates and nitrous oxide into the ground air, and the value of that reduction is $2.4 million per year. So they were capturing over 22,000 tons of carbon dioxide a year. They're transpiring 3,200 million gallons per year. What that means, it is creating cooling. So transpiration is when you wake up in the morning and that in the summertime and you see the dew on the grass, that is plants transpiring. It's creating more water into your water systems. It is cooling your areas, and trees do that as well. And then stormwater management, which is an incredible cost to all of communities across the US, but particularly for Plymouth as well. We're avoiding stormwater runoff, and the value of that is $1.8 million a year. So that's just a snapshot. Again, we'll go into more detail with the climate boards and the climate and public health boards in the next section of this workshop. But I wanted to talk a little bit about what Plymouth has been doing to date to help build a more resilient community. So one example that's very at the forefront because of Plymouth 400th anniversary is the Town Brook Restoration Project. So Town Brook is a first order stream that goes from Billington Sea to Plymouth Harbor. So it's a critically important area for managing water quality, restoring habitat, and flood control. And the Town Brook Restoration Project removed 4 dams, as well as renovated Brewster Gardens and created a more beautiful space and restored anadromous fish habitat. So this is a really important climate resilience project that's going to minimize flooding, flood control, improve water quality and habitat, as well as just the whole ecosystem. So that's an excellent project that was just recently completed in town. Another example is the Eel River's Headwater Restoration Project. This is one that was the first of its kind in Massachusetts that was working to restore cranberry bogs into a Atlantic cedar swamp. And so that was recently completed in 2000. It was completed in 2010, but it again is restoring habitat to enhance the ecological services of that community, creating better flood control, beautifying the town. And there was a really extensive partnership, the Nature Conservancy and the town and the state and other private partners. And it had a lot of grant funding to be completed. Some of the more recent projects that are occurring, I know the town of Plymouth is allocated $4.3 million. A lot of that is being funded with grant funding to do some restoration from the damage that occurred from Winter Storm Riley in March of 2018. And that includes damage to Plymouth Long Beach and the shoreline protection infrastructure there. You can see how some of that damage occurred. The photo on the left is the water coming in after Winter Storm Riley, before the storm surge had ceased and had receded. Another project that a couple of projects I wanted to mention is the Plymouth Ponds and Lakes Stewardship Project. So this is a partnership with the Massachusetts Environmental Trust and the UMass Boston, UMass Dartmouth, and as well as the Plymouth Department of Marine and Environmental Affairs. And they've done a survey of all the ponds in the town of Plymouth, and so the results of that are an atlas where we now know there's 1.23 ponds for every day of the year, or 450 ponds encompassing 5,000 acres. This is an obviously critical component of Plymouth's landscape, Plymouth's water quality, Plymouth's beauty and culture and history. And this project is working with volunteers with a lot of neighborhood organizations and watershed organizations to test the water quality of these ponds and track that. So this is an excellent project to begin to look at some of the needs for restoration and water quality improvements. The other is the preservation of the county farm in Plymouth that happened recently. And so this is looking at food security and as well as beautification and conservation strategies that will help build resilience and healthy food choices and supporting the farmers market in town. So these are another important resilience strategies that I wanted to bring to your attention. Also, Plymouth has taken on very strongly affordable housing and ending homelessness. And so wanted to give some examples of that. This is a recent community preservation project. It was completed many years ago, but there's been $5.8 million that have been allocated from Community Preservation Act funds for affordable housing. This includes Cherry Hill, to the workforce housing buy down program, and to programs to help the homeless, as well as units on affordable housing units and homelessness units on Russell and Murray streets. So this is an important component for building house and really enhancing the housing component of the social determinants of health. As we know, during severe weather events, homelessness could have that can have a very severe impact on those that live in affordable housing or are homeless. So that is a snapshot. Again, there's more information to come to help you dig into some of these issues in more detail and at your pace that is conducive to you during this COVID-19 pandemic. But we are looking to have you share your experiences, your expertise, and your knowledge to come up with a really viable action plan, one that's really relevant to this community to help protect the town through climate change impacts and to promote a healthy Plymouth. So the online public workshop objectives are looking to understand the connections between ongoing issues of climate hazards and local planning actions in your community and how these issues affect public health, so hazards being climate change hazards. We're looking to identify and map vulnerabilities and strength of people and places, both hard infrastructure and the natural environment and parks. We want to develop and prioritize action that reduce vulnerabilities, reinforce Plymouth's strengths, and protect public health, and identify opportunities to advance actions that further reduce the impact of climate change, increase climate resilience, and protect public health in Plymouth. So in the next sections, we'll be asking you a series of questions that effectively help us populate this, what's called a community resilience building workshop matrix. So if we were to be doing this in person, we would be working with you to complete this matrix, but the questions that we've designed for you to answer are looking to look at some of the strengths and vulnerabilities for infrastructure, society, and public health and environment, specifically in categories in relationship to extreme heat, flooding that might be caused by ponds and rivers inland, sea level rise and coastal erosion, severe storms like nor'easters, windstorms, ice storms, as well as drought and wildfire. So the topics in red are those climate hazards that we want you to look at in comparing strengths and vulnerabilities of infrastructure, society, public health, and environment. And then we'll be looking to create some actions and prioritize those together. So the overall agenda going back, after this presentation, there's about 25 minutes of information boards. There are 5 boards. They each come with their own audio to explain what these information boards mean and the transcripts associated if you're better at learning information by reading. And then we'll ask you a series of questions. So there are 7 questions in total. Some of those will take a little bit longer or a little bit less, depending on your area of expertise. But we're looking for, as I mentioned, environmental vulnerabilities and strengths, infrastructure vulnerability and strengths, society vulnerability and strengths, and then actions for each of those categories. And then the last component is for you to choose the top 3 of those actions that you think are most important for Plymouth to implement. As a part of this online workshop, we are hosting live online office hours for you in the event you have any technical issues or problems or want to have a more in-depth conversation with any of the information we are providing for you today. So we have scheduled those for Friday, April 10th from 1 to 3 p.m. We will send out a invitation to you. This is just a Zoom link, so you can meet with us via Zoom. If you want to call in, you can do that as well. That information will be in the invitation we send out to you. And then there'll be another on Friday, April 24th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. So you're welcome to join us at any period of time. You can stay on as long as you want or just ask your questions and leave. And we will look to record those periods of time for your edification if you can't join us live. So some of the next steps are for you to stay involved is that we will have a public forum likely in mid to late May. We haven't scheduled this yet, just in light of the uncertainty with COVID-19. We are more than likely looking to host this public forum online, but live, and where we'll collate all of the answers that have occurred to date from the public forums and the public focus groups and your actions from this MVP workshop. And we'll be asking the public to do prioritization. So we'll summarize all of that information for you, and we'll look to you to prioritize those actions through a voting forum online, more than likely. And if you do have any questions or comments, you're most welcome to to reach out to myself or my colleague, Jeanette Pantoja, to ask us any questions about this project, and we're here to provide you assistance and help make this as seamless as possible for you. Again, I thank you very much for your participation in this workshop. I do hope that you all stay healthy and well. Please feel free to reach out to us. Your expertise is invaluable, even if you don't feel like you have an answer to any of these questions. Just your relationship with this town means so much to help defining its future. So thank you again. Stay well, and we look forward very much to hearing from you. Goodbye.